it is great to be here today. It's actually nice that we have some gray overcast skies because we do need it. It's nice that we've had a little bit of rain, certainly still not enough. But we are standing here today in the scars of the McEwen fire. I actually, as I was driving up, I was remembering literally a year ago standing over that side as firefighters were coming in and out and trucks were going fast to be able to get to fire as it moved. That fire sparked on July 4th last year. It burned nearly 300 acres of land and threatened homes, which I remember how many homes and neighborhoods were very, very scared because there was some very tenuous moments there with wind and the hot, dry conditions. I want to first thank our fire chief, Jeff Snyder, Deputy Chief Greg Yates, and the rest of our friends from Central Mason Fire and EMS who were absolutely essential and critical in the quick mobilization of fire resources and the ability to get on them quickly. And as you can see, they are still doing it today. Oh, always ready at a moment's notice. To be ready in the case of fires. I also want to thank the representatives from Green Diamond for being here. I remember also all the work that your team went behind the scenes and on the lines and helping make sure that we could contain this fire quickly. I do remember how scary and frightening this situation was. And in fact, I think it was a wake-up call to the west side of our state. While we've had a number of fires in Mason County over the years, most of them were largely able to be left to be quite small. In fact, I think one legislator from the eastern Washington referred to his seatmate in western Washington as, oh, you have a little campfire over there, when it had grown to about 3 acres in Mason County. But the fact that this one grew to around 300 acres and was so close to residential areas was sort of presenting and reminding of us that fire, no district is immune from fire. And in fact, we're seeing more and more fires on the west side of the state. Last year, this was the opening of the season on west side. And by the end of the year, we had more fires west of the Cascades for the first time in recorded history. And I, based on my experience of 8 years, believe that this was probably not an anomaly, but the beginning of where we're going to see more and more fires west of the Cascades. And more of them in more urban or more densely populated area. I also, it's a reminder when you, that I think a lot of the people on the west side of the state are not yet aware or being fully cognizant of how risky our forests are, how dangerously dry they are, and how easy it is to start a wildfire, and how the different mechanisms that will start a fire. And whereas the central and eastern part of our state has become quite aware over the last decade, just given all the fires that we've had. And as we are approaching July 4th, which is a time of celebration, it's a time of people getting excited, getting outdoors, enjoying and celebrating our nation history and independence. At the same time, I think they like to use a few instruments that can be incredibly high risk, which is those fireworks. I was actually born on July 3rd, and my grandmother, I was born at 11:55 at night on July 3rd, and my grandmother said, I think we're going to have a firecracker. And I always loved fireworks and firecrackers for that reason until I stepped into this role, and for the last 8 years they make me incredibly scared because too often people are setting them off are not aware of how to do it safely and where to do it safely, and too often they're not aware of how our landscape has changed dramatically. So while we are in the midst of fire season currently right now, and we have already had over 300 fires to date, many of those, not quite half, on the west side of the state, we are urging people to please take all precautions to be safe. We need more than ever before people to be aware, to reinforce our message and urge, implore, and inspire Washingtonians across the state to be smart, be safe, and be considerate this weekend. Because it's not only the right thing, this weekend as we celebrate our country and everything it means to us, it's actually the patriotic thing to do, especially when you're thinking about Washington State as the evergreen state. It's our responsibility to keep it evergreen rather than turning it charcoal black like what we see around us. It's also our responsibility to be taking care of our neighbors and our community members, and especially our first responders. So the more we are actually reducing the risk of fire, the more we're keeping our neighbors safe, the more we're keeping our first responders safe. Um, I have to just give a little history. Back during World War II, with thousands of seasoned firefighters off fighting in Europe and across the Pacific, it was actually left to the Americans here at home to protect and safeguard our forests from the threat of wildfire. People may not be aware of that. The U.S. Forest Service actually launched the largest fire safety campaign in our history, one that quickly became a call to arms for millions of Americans, especially along the West Coast. And it also commissioned an American icon who's going to be celebrating his 80th birthday. I am not turning 80, and I want to just reemphasize that. It's only Smokey that's turning 80 this coming month. So fire safety was no longer a chore or a choice. It was actually a challenge. It was a challenge made to every single American, no matter how small they were or how tall they were, to actually do their part to prevent forest fires. We could do enormous amount right now if every single person in Washington State who's out on the landscape, who's out enjoying the holiday and this summer, to help make sure there one less spark in our forest, one less spark on our landscape. And as I speak currently, people need to be aware we already have nearly 8,000 acres of our state is on fire, including the Pioneer Fire in Lake Chelan, which is incredibly challenging and difficult. This is my second fire in Stehekin since I started this role over 8 years ago. The Gold Creek Fire near Carlton in Okanogan County, and then the Slide Ranch Fire that is burning just south of White Swan. My heart goes out to the families who lost their homes already in that fire. And please know that our prayers are with you, and we are doing everything we can to help get on these fires quickly. I also need to just remind everyone of the tragedy that happened in Spokane County last year, because as I enter this fire season, it is fresh on my mind of the unbelievable devastation, loss of life, 2 lives, as well as the loss of over 350 homes and structures. And too many of our community members are still trying to rebuild after that. And all it takes, like I said, is a spark for that to happen, and it can happen anywhere and everywhere. And that is why we need to continue to remind people, please, please be safe this July 4th. Be safe this summer. Please do everything you can to actually prevent these fires, because it only takes one spark for it to get out of hand, especially when we're hot and dry and we have wind. So with that, I want to now turn it over to our chief to say a few words.
Thank you.
They're going to listen far more to you than me.
I'm not sure about it. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank all you folks for inviting us out here today, standing in front of the scar of the McEwen fire, working with the Department of Natural Resources. I want to thank Commissioner Hilary Franz for inviting us well and working with the fire districts out there. Our relationship with the Department of Natural Resources is really first rate. I've been in the business now for over 30 years, and I think it's far better these days than maybe it was when I first started out. Kind of a little brief history of the McEwen fire behind us. As Commissioner Franz mentioned, on July 4th, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Central Mason was dispatched to a possible brush fire behind Rainbow Lake. We happened to have a unit that was very close. That unit arrived within about 2 minutes, reported a working fire about a 1/4 acre in size with some homes threatened. Pretty quickly after that, that unit came on the air and said that they had some pretty rapid fire growth and requested additional alarms. We assigned additional alarms to that fire, which included Department of Natural Resources, other units within Mason County Fire Districts, as well as Green Diamond Resources, started sending units to the fire. Eventually that fire grew to be a little over, just under 300 acres. It caused the evacuation of over 200 homes. While I was en route to the fire, I called my deputy chief, who I found out was actually the first unit on scene, and said to him, I think we're going to lose some homes today. And his answer back to me is, Chief, we're doing the best we can. And I said, what do you need? He says, I need everything. I said, we'll get you the resources. We'll get you what resources we can get you. one of the real advantages we had with this fire was the air resources that Department of Natural Resources provided pretty much right off the bat. At one point, there was 9 aircraft that were working the fire. Those were rotary as fixed wings aircraft. What those aircraft did was they bought us time on the ground so we could do the evacuations, which was done by the Mesa County Sheriff's Office, as well as the ground troops could start getting fire line in place, and they could also and we could work getting fire line in place and fire suppression. Looking at the fire behind us, it makes us think, the 4th of July is coming up now. The weather is going to be very similar. The conditions behind us, if you look, the fuels are nice and green. By the end of the weekend, these fuels will be dried out. These light grasses behind us. And I want people to think about fireworks safety while they're doing that. Celebrate our independence, spend time with family, friends, play sports, softball, mom, dad, grandma, apple pie, all that stuff we want you to do, we want you to enjoy and barbecue. We would like it that you would go watch professional fireworks shows as opposed to doing them at your own home, but we know people will go and do them at their own homes. So what we're asking for there is to be smart while you're doing that. Make sure you do them in an area that doesn't have the light glasses next to buildings, maybe in a gravel parking lot, something like that if you're going to do them there. Please have water on site and a shovel. And when you're done with those fireworks, put them in a container of water, like a kiddie pool with water in it or a bucket with water in it. So that way, if the wind comes up, those fireworks don't reignite. If you have small children, or not small children, if you have children, make sure mom and dad, make sure you're watching them while they're doing those fireworks. And if all of us do this, then we all get to enjoy the 4th of July festivities. One person can ruin it for a lot of people, as what happened last year at this time. I do want to reach out real quick to the community and thank the community itself, not only the Department of Natural Resources, the fire service community, but the Mason County community, the folks that were helping each other. For us, this is an unusual event. We don't do large-scale evacuations like this. And as I was over on the back side of the fire, watching community members help their people that maybe have mobility problems or getting horses or livestock out, it took all of those folks to make this successful. We didn't lose any homes. We didn't lose any lives. We lost a few derelict outbuildings was all it was. So again, if we work together, be safe with fireworks, we can all enjoy the holiday. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. You got to stay up here in case there's questions. I think the other thing I would just add is because I remember the McEwen fire, we had 9 aircraft at one point in time, which again, unbelievable the investments we have because we've grown from just 8 Vietnam War helicopters to now last year at our fullest, around 40. This year at our fullest we'll have 42. But if you have too many fires on the landscape at any given time in multiple places, it stretches all the resources very, very thin. And we were lucky during the McEwen fire that we actually only had few other fires happening. Unlike what happened during the Spokane County fire, where we had 17 fires on the landscape spread out throughout the state, which then takes our resources and taxes them much more significantly. And that's why the urgency around everybody doing their part to please be safe is so critical and to be one less spark. So we're happy to do Q&A with anybody and everybody. I do have to highlight the whole grass is green out here, but that grass is going to dry out very, very fast and create a lot of fuel, which you've heard me say a million times.
Yes, and I'll ask you about that again, because we just talked to someone who was evacuated right behind you, and she is thrilled that everything's green and the planting that's come, but how quick can this turn and be a danger again? Because right now she feels like she's not worried.
Yeah. Well, and this is what people oftentimes are just saying, wow, we had so much rain. In fact, we just had rain a few days ago, and then we had rain a couple weeks ago, and it's June. We've had enough moisture. We're going to be sound and we're going to be safe. And the reality is when we have wet springs, all it takes is a few weeks or about 80-degree temperatures, which we can see on the horizon, where all of that fuel that's now been able to grow taller and higher can dry out. And when it dries out, now it's more fuel on the landscape. All it takes is a spark. And for me, what I say is the magical sort of horrific wildfire cocktail, if I can call it that, is you've got dry ground that's dried out over 5-6 days of 80-degree temperatures. You then have more fuel because it has been able to grow taller because we had a wet spring, so you have more fuel on the forest or the landscape. And 3, you add wind to that, and it is incredibly difficult to fight those fires, contain those fires, keep our firefighters safe, but also keep our community safe.
I had a question for the chief. We do think fireworks were to blame for this. I know it wasn't necessarily definitive, but can you step up and
Yeah, so I actually reached out to the fire marshal today just to kind of confirm. Human cause is what it is. It's basically undetermined human cause. We had reports when we arrived right away that people had said there had been folks in the area shooting off fireworks and were seen in the area, but it was never determined that was the actual cause.
And I'll ask both of you, what is that like knowing that, and I know you told me the number before, 80%, I don't know what the number is.
90 now.
90% of the fires that you folks have to respond to are human caused.
So, yes, it's grown. I think the reason you cited 80% is a few years back, but now our numbers are crawling up and they are around 90% the past few years. 90% of our fires are human caused. So first, obviously, that is incredibly depressing, but it also, though, should be empowering, right? It means that if it's human cause, then we do have the power to create change and prevent these fires in the first place versus something naturally happening to us like lightning that I cannot control. And so I think that's the important messages out there that we need to get out there, is that 90% of our fires are caused by humans. We are already been fighting fires. We had, by the end of April, around 200 fires, almost half of those on the west side, right? We are already full court press, and we are expecting this to be a very difficult, challenging fire season. And we're urging people to learn from the past by being one less of spark out there. People need to be paying attention to the burn bans. On June 20th, a ban was issued on dispersed campfires on state lands throughout the southeast region of the state. We are watching sort of the conditions in every corner of the state, and we will be issuing burn bans regionally based on the conditions we're finding. Local jurisdictions also set their burn bans. We're urging people to pay attention to that. And honestly, you should just consider it. It's bad, 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 because precaution is worth an ounce of prevention. Prevention is worth an ounce of actual cure, right? So, and then I do want to say to people, like, enormous amount of change has happened in the amount of resources we have. We actually are positioned this year to have even more resources than we had last year or the year before. Our goal and approach is now that we have blanketed the state, especially, with resources, as we've seen more and more resources on the west side of the Cascades and more populated areas. And so time is everything, as you pointed out. The sooner we're able to get the resources to that fire, we spread them so that at any given point in time, we will have air resources on a fire, not just one, but multiple within 30 minutes. And sometimes we get them even sooner, as well as the ground resources, everything from the investments we've made in the local fire districts, from fire trucks and brush trucks to our own agency's resources. And last year we had it naturally became a competition where our dozers were trying to beat the planes to a fire to see who can contain it faster, which I kind of like that kind of competition, as long as they're safe in doing it. So, anything else? I will say one last thing I've said, because I've traveled this whole state. I got to be honest, looking at this forest, I saw it a lot in central and eastern Washington. I really did. And I think this, if you look around at this forest, many people who have traveled throughout the state have seen this kind of forest situation in central and eastern Washington and many, many corners of it. And I think, unfortunately, this should be the opening wake-up call that this is partly what's happening now on the west side, in every corner of the west side of the state. So, thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.